Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Ghosty Girls. We missed you so much. Thank you for tuning in. We hope you are enjoying our episodes. If you'd like us to talk about anything different, too bad. We still love you. And, yeah, welcome.
Yes, welcome. I want to start out by saying that we really appreciate all the support. So many people have been listening. We've been getting feedback and constructive criticism. And I want you all to know that we are taking that to heart. We have made some changes. Some of you mentioned that the intro music was too long. And yes, it was. I recognize that. So we fixed that. That is no longer a problem. Also, some people had mentioned that they could not find us on Spotify, even though we were registered on Spotify. That has been fixed. So we are now up and running on Spotify. So yeah, we see you, we hear you. The only criticism that I will not change is our cursing. I'm sorry, that's who we are.
It's true. I will do my best to reserve from saying the word dick as much as I do. I can't make any promises, but I will try. That is a regular word in my vocabulary.
I didn't think that you said it that much.
I don't know, but we got some feedback that I did. So I'm going to try to be more cognizant of that.
Okay.
Or not.
But I think it's also important that we are authentic to ourselves. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I'm fucking sorry.
I'm not fucking sorry, dick.
Yeah, just kidding. I'm really not sorry. Like, this is who we are. And honestly, like, my favorite compliment that we've gotten about this podcast is that, and this is from people that know us, they say that it's like sitting down with us and having a conversation. Like, it feels like it's authentic and it flows. So I'm going to stay to that, you know?
And that was our intention, too, when we started this, was to sit down as friends, force ourselves to hang out, right?
Yeah.
And we're rocking and rolling, I think.
What you need to keep in mind when you're listening to this podcast, respectfully, you are listening to a podcast about murder and dismemberments.
Yes.
And a bunch of fucked up shit. And I'm sorry, but sometimes the word fuck is in order. I mean,
more so than not with these topics.
It's a lot. Yeah. So we're going to stay true to ourselves, but we will take constructive criticism. And like I said, we see and we hear you.
And I will continue to speak into my mic, not around it, so you can actually hear me.
See, we're moving in the right direction.
Look at us go.
Yeah. And speaking of that, we have cool stuff coming up. Like, we have a lot of exciting things. Like, we have a potential interview with someone who has firsthand knowledge of a huge case.
I'm super excited.
Yes. I'm hoping that pans out because I'm so excited to talk to this person. So excited. I've been following that case since I was a kid. And talking to this person will just be a highlight of my life.
Well, you're already talking to them, which is kind of a big deal.
That's true. Yeah.
I mean, you're so excited. I know you guys can't see her, but she's like lighting up just talking about it. It's pretty awesome.
Yes. I've been very passionate about this case and the outcome of it and hoping that things will change for the people involved in the case. So it's super exciting. Again, really hope it pans out. And also, we may have a huge paranormal investigation coming our way that we would love to, get EVPs, play them on the podcast. I mean, we want to bring you guys along for the ride on that one.
Absolutely. We'll try to do a whole video beginning to end on kind of how the whole process works as far as, interviewing the homeowners and doing our best to get them the results that they want, whether that be just to find out who they are or putting them in contact with someone who can help the spirits.
Yeah.
If there are any, move on, or I don't know, get them out if they're not trying to move on. I don't know, but hopefully we'll be able to help them and you guys can join us on that adventure.
But yeah, Alicia and I are paranormal investigators, and I'm speaking for myself right now. I don't want to speak for Alicia, but
You can. It's fine.
I personally want to get back to the basics of ghost hunting. I want to investigate. I want to get evidence. I want to help people.
Mm-hmm.
I just feel like going back to the basics is, it's what I need to do right now.
Same.
I got burnt out on it, but now I'm ready to get back into the game.
Yeah.
And do things our way.
Our way, and also at our own pace.
Exactly.
It doesn't have to be every weekend or,
Yes.
A random Wednesday night when you have to get up at 5 a.m. the next day.
Correct. Yeah. And also, I mean, you have to understand that paranormal investigating, it burns you out, especially with people who have a sensitivity. It burns you out, and I feel like when I do an investigation, I need time to kind of like just re-energize my aura, or I don't know if I'm explaining that right.
Spirits.
Yeah. It's a lot. And, I don't know.
See, I have no sensitivities. The next day I'm like, let's go. Woo.
Yeah, but there's been times where you've done investigations and been like, holy shit, like that was a lot.
Yeah.
You know?
You can feel when it's heavy.
Oh yeah, absolutely. So with that, we just wanted to talk about some podcast business and some upcoming things. But honestly, I was struggling a little bit to think of podcast ideas because there's a lot of podcasts that I want to do, but I don't feel like I am there yet as a podcaster. Like, I feel like I need to kind of get more in a groove and, doing big cases like Ted Bundy and stuff like that.
Yeah.
It's a lot, and I don't know if I am like talented enough as a podcaster to get away with those episodes.
You 100% are.
I don't think so. So I've been trying to stick to like small cases so I can really do them justice.
Mm-hmm.
So I was going back and forth with what I wanted to do. And, I always kind of like life imitates art. I get ideas from things that are going on in pop culture and going on in my life and whatnot. And one of the biggest things going on right now is the Menendez Brothers case. And on Netflix, they released the Monsters, the Erik and Lyle Menendez story by Ryan Murphy. And of course, I watched all of that. The opening scene to that series is it's chef's kiss. It was awesome.
Yeah.
Everybody needs to watch the first like 10 minutes of that. I mean, just for entertainment value, because my jaw was on the floor. And then just recently, they dropped another documentary on Netflix about the brothers that actually has recorded interviews from them. That one's more accurate than the Ryan Murphy one. I would caution you in that the Ryan Murphy one, if you haven't seen it yet, or even if you have, it's very entertaining, but it's also very inaccurate. Like, it's very inaccurate.
Take it with a grain of salt.
Yeah. So, I was thinking about doing something on the Menendez brothers, but then I was like, oh my God, it's such a big case. Like, I'm nervous. But then my fiance gave to me a basketball card, and it's a Mark Jackson from the New York Knicks. And if you look closely in the background, there sits Erik and Lyle Menendez after they murdered their parents. And I was like, if this isn't a sign, I don't know what is. So now, I'm looking at it right now, is the basketball card in a protective case that has Erik and Lyle Menendez in the background.
I see it.
I love it. It's so fucking random.
Can I touch it?
Yes, absolutely. And I love it. It's going to be hung up on the wall next to my plaque that has a piece of Jeffrey Dahmer's apartment building. Don't judge me, okay? Don't. So here we go. We're doing this.
Okay, I'm in and I'm excited. You got this.
Deep breath. All right. On the night of Sunday, August 20th, 1989, Beverly Hills Emergency received a panicked 911 call from a frantic 21-year-old man named Lyle Menendez, who was screaming that someone had killed his parents. The 911 call is available to listen to online, and it's disturbing. You can hear his brother, 18-year-old Erik Menendez, just sobbing and screaming in the background. Both of the brothers are in complete hysterics, but the 911 operator was able to establish from Lyle that their parents were shot. When asked who shot them, Lyle told the 911 operator that they did not know and that they had just gotten home and found them there. Investigators responded to the huge, beautiful Beverly Hills mansion that was once actually occupied by Michael Jackson, if you can believe it.
I
Isn't that crazy?
cannot.
I know.
Was it the one with the theme park?
No, it was not.
That's some bullshit.
Where they found the mangled bodies of 45-year-old Jose Menendez and 47-year-old Kitty Menendez on a couch in a family room. Jose had been shot execution style to the back of the head and received a total of 5 bullet wounds. Kitty was shot a total of 9 times with a 12-gauge shotgun. I was able to deep dive and found some images of the autopsies of Jose and Kitty, and their bodies were fucked up. It was not a pretty scene.
You saw them?
Yes.
Oh, geez.
The autopsy reports that Jose suffered a, quote, explosive decapitation with evisceration of the brain. So it was gnarly. So investigators immediately turned to the 2 Menendez brothers to get their version of events. And their story went like this. Earlier that night, the night of August 20th, 1989, Erik and Lyle went to go see Batman at the movie theater. Side note, it was the one with Michael Keaton as Batman and Jack Nicholson as Joker. And I threw that in there for you because Alicia is a huge Batman girly.
It's true.
So I knew you would appreciate that. So anyway, they tell police that they went to go see Batman, but they had to turn around and go back to the house because Erik had left his ID at home. So they go back to the house. They find their parents dead on the couch. That's it. That's their alibi. They also discussed with investigators that they felt that this could have been a mob hit due to their father having shady business dealings with the entertainment industry. Now, Jose Menendez was a big-time music executive that was actually responsible for the band Menudo. Mm-hmm.
Yeah?
Yeah. And keep Menudo in your back pocket because we're going to circle back to Menudo.
Oh.
Yep. So the immediate theory was that this was a mob-related hit or had something to do with business. Now, one of the things that the Menendez brothers have received a lot of shit for was the fact that they went full-on balls to the wall with their parents' money in the months after their death. They bought expensive clothes. They bought Rolex watches. Lyle bought himself a brand new Porsche. They went on trips. They went to sporting events, like that basketball game that they're pictured in. Erik hired himself a private tennis coach. One of them bought a whole ass restaurant. They went hard on the money.
Sounds like it.
There's no disputing that.
I mean, just front row seats to a Knicks game is pricey.
Oh, yeah.
Damn.
Absolutely.
A restaurant?
Mm-hmm. Yep. They ended up spending around $700,000 in roughly 6 months. But playing devil's advocate here, these were rich kids.
Yeah.
Their parents had a shit ton of money. They spent a shit ton of money regardless. So some felt that they weren't being excessive. They were just keeping up the lifestyle that they were accustomed to. They also, in my opinion, may have had a valid reason for not being all that upset about the murders of their parents. But we'll get into that.
Dun, dun, dun.
So while all this was going on, Erik Menendez was having a very difficult time mentally. He was really struggling. And in his fragile state he was in, he decided to begin seeing his old therapist again, Dr. L. Jerome Oziel. Now, Erik was a prior patient of Dr. Oziel's who was hired by Jose Menendez after both Erik and Lyle were caught burglarizing homes in Calabasas, home of the Kardashians. Not their actual home, but that's where they live.
Okay.
In Calabasas. Erik, unfortunately, was made to take the brunt of the blame because he was underage at the time of the burglaries, and Jose Menendez couldn't bear the thought of his favorite son Lyle's life being trashed by this because he was an adult. So he would have faced more serious charges.
Why is it always the spoiled rich kids that feel like they're entitled to go rob somebody's house, and they don't even need to rob someone's house? Why?
My opinion is that they were doing it to act out because there were things going on.
Okay.
I think they were acting out. but you'll see where I'm going with that. Erik got the shit end of the stick on that deal. He had to take the brunt of it because if Lyle took the brunt, he was an adult, he would have faced really serious charges that would have fucked up his life. But anyway, on October 31st, 1989, Halloween, Erik began seeing Dr. Oziel. He said in an interview with journalist Robert Rand that he was becoming increasingly frustrated because Dr. Oziel was not understanding the source of Erik's suicidal ideations. So, Erik ended up confessing to Dr. Oziel that he and his brother killed their parents.
Oh, shit.
Yes. Dr. Oziel then called Lyle and had Lyle come into the office. Yeah.
Oh,
now, this was not the first time that Erik confessed to the murders of his parents. Erik allegedly confessed to his friend Craig Signorelli about 2 weeks after the murders. Craig ultimately went to the police with the information, and up until this point, the police didn't really have anything to go on. There was virtually no evidence pointing to anyone. They had their suspicions of the brothers, but they had nothing concrete to go on. And it was also shoddy investigative work. They didn't even check their hands for gunshot residue.
Ugh.
If they would have found gunshot residue. So it was botched for sure.
Whoops.
Yep. Once Craig comes to the police and tells them about the confession, now the police have something to go on. So they decide to have Craig wear a wire while out to dinner with Erik in November of 1989. To the dismay of investigators, Craig was unable to get a recorded confession out of Erik that night. So investigators were at another standstill at this point. I mean, all they had was some guy saying, my friend confessed to murder. You can't arrest somebody for that.
And the therapist can't really tell, right?
Well, we'll get into that.
Oh, shit. Okay.
Then, on March 5th, 1990, an interesting woman by the name of Judalon Smith shows up to the police department, stating that she's got information about the murders of Jose and Kitty Menendez. She then tells stunned investigators that not only had their sons confessed to murder, but that her affair partner, Dr. L. Jerome Oziel, had recorded tapes of the confessions. And this is when it was revealed that Dr. Oziel had actually convinced Lyle and Erik that their conversation should be recorded, and they stupidly agreed. The information led to a search warrant executed on Dr. Oziel, where they found the tapes and took them into evidence. Just 3 days after Judalon Smith went to police and Dr. Oziel's home was raided, Lyle Menendez was arrested at the mansion where he and his brother took the lives of their parents. Erik, on the other hand, was out of the country for a tennis tournament. Remember when I said they splurged on a tennis instructor? Mm-hmm. Yeah. And on March 11, 1990, 3 days after the arrest of his brother, Erik Menendez returns home from Israel and surrenders to police. So, let's take a second to recap. We have confessions from both Lyle and Erik. They confessed that they killed their parents on tape. So we have the who, but we don't have the why. Why would two young men suddenly decide to ambush and shoot both of their parents to death while they are just sitting on the couch watching TV? The prosecution thinks it's an open and shut case. Two spoiled little rich boys offing their parents for access to their inheritance and life insurance policies. Makes sense, right?
That's what I would have guessed.
Bang the gavel, we're done here. But the truth behind the murders is much deeper and much more complicated than that. And here's where I'm going to take a moment to put a little disclaimer / trigger warning in here. We're going to be discussing disgusting acts like sexual abuse of children.
SA.
Yeah. If you were a victim of child abuse, or it's something that you can't tolerate, or something that will trigger you, tap out and join us next week. Listening to a podcast is not worth your mental health. So if you need to go, we get it. I would also like to go myself because I hate talking about this shit.
You want me to read it?
Like, I'll talk about deaths and dismemberments and cannibalism, whatever. But when it's kids, it's difficult.
Yeah, it's tough with children.
Yeah. But here we go. The trial of both Erik and Lyle Menendez began in July of 1993. Prosecution, of course, took the stance that the brothers did this purely for money. Their main thing was that the boys did this because they recently found out that they were being cut out of the will. The defense, however, painted a very different picture of what was actually going on in the Menendez home. The defense argued that while the brothers did commit the murders, they did so in self-defense / fear after years of sexual and emotional abuse from both Jose and Kitty Menendez. Sexual abuse from Jose, emotional abuse from Kitty. Both Lyle and Erik's attorneys, Jill Lansing and Leslie Abramson, respectively, who are also two bad bitches, argued that the boys were in fear of their life the night of the murders. Now, Jill and Leslie did an amazing job of finding tons of witnesses, including family, friends, business associates, etc., who all testified that Jose and Kitty were awful people. There were multiple stories about fits of anger and rage displayed by both Kitty and Jose, and multiple people testified that Jose found pleasure in publicly humiliating the boys whenever they didn't live up to his grandiose standards. A neighbor even testified that Jose once showed a group of people a Kitty porn movie at a dinner that they had at their house.
That's disgusting.
Very disgusting.
I mean, how's that not a red flag to the people who were eating dinner?
I'm sure it was, but also you have to remember this was the 90s.
Yeah.
And people did not take that kind of thing as seriously as they do now. And also he was a very powerful record executive.
You're right.
I mean, look at what's going on with the Diddy stuff. This shit's been going on for decades and no one said a damn thing.
Nope. And every day something new comes out.
Exactly.
It's crazy.
Powerful people get away with crazy shit. Teachers, family members, and friends all testified that they saw behavior from the boys that was indicative of sexual assault, including acting out, like when they created their burglary ring that they had going on.
Oh, I see.
Yep.
Okay.
Hypersexual activity, teenage bedwetting. Apparently, Lyle wet the bed until he was 14 years old.
Oh, my.
Yeah. And even Lyle losing his hair from stress.
That makes me sad.
See? Your opinions are kind of flippant, aren't they?
Yes.
This created a huge problem for the prosecution, and they admittedly had an extremely difficult time finding anyone who was willing to testify that Jose and Kitty were not giant pieces of shit. And speaking of shit, it really hit the fan when Lyle took the stand. Lyle's accusations and account of what happened to him at the hands of his father was absolutely horrifying. He testified that his father routinely molested and raped him beginning at the age of 6 for him and at the age of 3 for his brother Erik.
Are you... I'm going to choose my language. Are you freaking kidding me?
Jose would make the boys watch porn with him, and he forced them to do absolutely unspeakable acts that I'm not even going to get into.
I don't want to know.
Yeah. Now, supporting this claim was the neighbor who testified that Jose once showed him a child porn movie. So, I mean, things are kind of lining up. People are verifying allegations. I actually got a chance to watch some of the testimony during the first trial because the second one was not televised. But if you don't have the Court TV app, I would highly recommend getting it because they have all kinds of like court cases throughout history. Like they have the Casey Anthony case on there, the Menendez brothers. They even have Eileen Warnos, and you can watch their testimony. It's really cool. It also came out during Lyle's testimony that due to the abuse and sexual and psychological trauma that he endured from his father, he himself ended up doing the same thing to his little brother. Yeah. This caused him to break down on the stand, and he tearfully apologized over and over. So it's kind of like that theory, hurt people, and he was a kid. It's just, it's fucking awful.
If he was experiencing that, that was normalized then for him.
Exactly.
So it's something that maybe to him was showing love.
Yeah. Yeah, in a fucked up way.
Which sucks.
Yeah. Lyle also testified that he did, in fact, tell his mother several times about what Jose was doing to him, but that Kitty brushed it off and did nothing about it. Interestingly, a cousin of the brothers, Diane Vandermolen, also testified that Lyle, who was just 8 years old at the time, confided in her that his father was molesting him. Diane was understandably very disturbed by this. She was 17 at the time, so not an adult, but she, old enough to know. She went to Kitty to tell her about the conversation she had with Lyle, and she testified that Kitty did not believe her and even went as far as yanking Lyle up away from her and taking him away.
Wow.
Yeah. And that was the last time Lyle ever confided in her about that. Lyle wrapped up his testimony claiming that his father did stop sexually abusing him around the age of 8, but that Jose threatened to kill him if he ever told anyone. Lyle also testified that about a week before the murders, Erik revealed to him that the abuse was still going on. And Erik was a teenager at this point. Lyle was livid over this and ended up confronting their father, to which he was threatened with his life and essentially told to mind his own business. Jose said, "What I do with my son is not your business." Lyle states that from this point on, he was really in fear of his life because all of this had just resurfaced, and Jose obviously didn't want this information out and would try to silence anyone by any means necessary. So he was scared of his father.
I mean, who wouldn't be?
Yeah. Erik reiterated Lyle's testimony while on the stand, and he confirmed the years of abuse that he had endured at the hands of his father. Watching the footage of this trial, it's heartbreaking. It's like they were just on the stand, both crying. It was awful. I just can't look at either of them and think that they're making it up. I don't know. I believe them. You can clearly see the pain in them when they're testifying. And this did make an impact on the jury. The ones with vaginas, anyway. One of the most disturbing parts of the trial was when the defense team introduced photos of the genitals of Erik and Lyle Menendez, which were allegedly taken by Jose and saved by Kitty in an envelope that she hand wrote Erik's 6th birthday. And I watched both of the testimonies. They put those photos up on a huge board for the whole courtroom to see. There's no disputing that these pictures exist.
So I understand. It's a picture of his Frankenbeans.
Yes.
Or his, we'll just
underage
adult and say it is a picture of his penis and balls.
Yes. Both of the children.
On their 6th birthdays?
I don't know if it was on their 6th birthday, but the envelope was marked Erik's 6th birthday.
Maybe that was just a cover up.
Yeah, and there were naked photos of the boys in that envelope.
That's
disgusting. And there's no disputing that these exist.
Yeah, they were on the screen. So
how can you say that these kids were not fucking abused? That's not normal. You're a mom. Do you take pictures of your son's genitals?
No.
That's fucked up.
It's weird.
Whew, now I'm getting heated. Going back to the whole bedwetting thing and Lyle testifying that he had wet the bed up until he was 14 years old, his mother would actually rub his face in the urine-soaked sheets.
Are you kidding?
No, this is what he testified. Now, this is clearly a sign of sexual abuse in children. Bedwetting, past a certain age in children, that is a sign of sexual abuse. So why his mother would punish him instead of, maybe taking him to a doctor or a psychiatrist to actually figure out what the fuck is going on, we'll never know.
Because she was in on it and also just as fucked up and probably scared of her husband.
Yeah. The DA handling the case, Deputy District Attorney Pamela Bazanik, she did her best to poke holes in the claims that the brothers were sexually abused by their father. A lot of their case centered around the fact that Jose and Kitty appeared to be ambushed, and that due to this, the brothers were clearly not in fear of their lives that night. They also continuously pointed out the fact that the brothers had gone on a huge spending spree after the murders, and also the confession tapes. So that's what the prosecution had. Unfortunately for the brothers, the judge ruled that the audio tapes could be used in court because Dr. Oziel stated that the brothers had, quote, threatened him and that he felt that they were planning on murdering him. Now, Dr. Oziel is a piece of shit, and I don't really believe anything he says, so.
That's their therapist.
Yes.
Okay.
Yep. Because of these allegations, doctor-patient confidentiality was essentially voided. And this was because the doctor felt threatened. The whole thing is fucking stupid.
Well, why would he feel threatened?
He says that the boys said that they were going to murder him. I don't believe that.
If that wasn't on tape, they didn't say it.
Thank you. Thank you. That's what I'm saying. The tapes were considered damning by the prosecution because the brothers never once said that they killed their parents due to sexual abuse. I want to counter that by saying that the brothers, it was so ingrained in them to not talk about the sexual abuse that's why they didn't. And they were trying to protect the integrity of their family and their father. Like, if it's so ingrained in you to act a certain way as a child, like that's gonna, these boys were young anyway. I shouldn't say boys, but boys, you know? Yeah, they didn't talk about the sexual abuse. So although they confessed on the recording, there was still no motive. So, I mean, this tape is pretty much useless, in my opinion, because the brothers weren't claiming that they didn't kill them. Like, they acknowledged that. They fully admitted that they killed their parents. A funny thing regarding the tapes, remember the woman who ratted out Dr. Oziel, that Judalon Smith lady? Mm-hmm. She actually became a witness for the defense. So she flipped. Turns out she was very scorned by Dr. Oziel and wanted him to go down by any means necessary.
Oh.
Yeah. She also ended up accusing Dr. Oziel of raping her and forcing her to take medications against her will, since she was also a patient of his. So he was fucking one of his patients.
I have no words.
You know, you couldn't even make this shit up if it was a Hollywood movie.
No.
It's wild.
I mean, that's why that documentary was probably so popular.
Oh, yeah. Because it's what you can't make it up. Like,
right. It's beyond creative thinking.
Yeah. So after you finish this podcast, I want everyone, if you haven't already, to watch the new documentary on Netflix about the Menendez brothers. And I'm not talking about the Ryan Murphy one. I'm talking about the actual documentary with prison interviews from the brothers. And I want you all to watch this solely for the purpose of the DA, this Pamela chick. She's unhinged. At one point in the documentary, she makes a comment about how she's not afraid of TikTok people coming to her house because has guns and is ready to go. She's fucking crazy. She also makes really nasty comments about one of the female defense attorneys, basically calling her out for being money hungry. But yet Pamela is the one doing the interview on Netflix for money. So how does that make sense? I don't know.
Bitches be tripping.
Yeah. She comes off as just an incredibly unlikable person who only sees things in black and white. And that's not a good quality for an attorney, in my opinion.
No.
But what do I know? I'm just some bitch.
Some bitch.
Yep. So the prosecution continued their narrative about the brothers killing for murder, and they painted a picture of Lyle and Erik being spoiled, evil, rich kids. And the public seemed to feel the same way. There were multiple TV parodies about the brothers, and talk show hosts like Jay Leno continuously made fun of their testimony, crying about being sexually abused by their father. Because this is the 90s, and people apparently thought it was funny to watch two men discuss sexual abuse that they endured by their father and laugh at their expense. Family of the Menendez brothers even contacted the Jay Leno show to ask them to stop making fun of the boys. And they were basically just told to fuck off and that the Menendez brothers were public fodder, and they kept doing it.
Now I don't like Jay Leno.
Yeah. 90s media was like the fucking Wild West back then.
He looks like a penis with balls for a chin anyway.
Yeah, it's disgusting.
Or should I say he looks like a dick.
It also didn't help that this trial was broadcast live on court TV. So people were treating it more like a soap opera and not an actual murder with allegations of sexual abuse, child sexual abuse.
So people weren't taking it serious because it was on TV.
They were laughing at the boys and making fun of them and saying that they laughing at them crying.
All of this is making me very sad.
And people wonder why sexual abuse victims don't come forward.
I get it. Especially from the 90s.
Yeah. A very common argument with the public at the time was that if the boys really were sexually abused by their father, why didn't they just leave and move out? Well, it's important to note that Erik was planning on doing just that. He was planning on going away to college, to Stanford. And he wanted to leave his father and all that shit behind. His father, however, being the one who was always in control of the family, flat out told Erik that he was not going to Stanford and that he would be attending UCLA instead, which was closer. Even worse, Jose told Erik that Erik was to live with him and that he was not going to be able to live on campus. So he wouldn't let him live on campus.
Because he was worried about his secret coming out.
And probably because he wanted to continue doing it.
Well, yeah.
Yeah, Jose at this point was still sexually abusing Erik. So this, in Erik's mind, solidified the fact that he would never get away from his father and he'd never get away from the sexual abuse. Everything was controlled by Jose and Jose's money. And that's something that people really need to understand, is that this man was terrifying. He was controlling. He was dangerous. They were scared of him. The college talk allegedly happened a couple of weeks before the murders. And I really feel like this was the straw that broke the camel's back. Like, Erik finally realized that he was out of options. And in his mind, he knew that the sexual abuse would continue as long as both he and his father were still alive. He didn't feel like he would ever get away from it. You also have to remember that this was an 18-year-old kid. So I know at 18 you're officially an adult, like I get it, but Erik, he was still like a baby, you know? He was 18.
Well, not to mention the mental and physical abuse. Mental and physical abuse. I mean, that alone can make you regress.
The effects, yeah, the effects of the brain, it's no joke. And speaking of the brain, I know that I say this all the time. I think I've said it on a prior podcast, but your brain isn't fully developed at 18. Mm-mm. In fact, according to multiple sources, the brain of a male isn't fully developed until around the age of 30.
You sure it's not 50?
So seeing no other options, he decided to go to his big brother, who he always felt protected by, and he confessed the abuse to him, which started the chain reaction, leading to them deciding they needed to just get rid of their parents. So the jury had a lot to think about, and they also had a few options. A verdict of first-degree murder if they decided that the brothers were not in danger and plotted the killing of their parents, or they had the options of second-degree murder, involuntary manslaughter, or voluntary manslaughter. If the jury determined that the brothers were guilty of involuntary manslaughter as a result of the fear for their lives, it was possible to sentence them to a shorter term than what they had already served leading up to the trial, which could have resulted in their release. And this has happened before in other cases. The jury deliberated for weeks and were completely deadlocked on the sentencings of both Lyle and Erik. And the trial resulted in a mistrial. Female members of the jury ultimately revealed that it was the men on the jury that were the problem.
Of course.
And that it was the men who pretty much refused to take the sexual abuse allegation seriously. And that's what resulted in the deadlock. So now we move on to trial number 2. This time around, the boys were tried together, not separately, and they had one jury determining their fate. Another huge difference between this trial and the first was that the judges ruled that cameras would not be permitted in the courtroom.
Smart.
Yep. So this one was not televised. Unfortunately for the brothers, society had majorly changed since the first trial wrapped up. Remember another little trial that took place in California that involved a massively famous football player that was accused of killing his ex-wife and her friend?
Did the glove fit him? I can't remember.
If the glove don't fit, you must acquit. Yeah, O.J. Simpson. Well, his ultimate acquittal ended up having a huge impact on the public opinion of the judicial system, specifically in California. People were outraged that O.J. was found not guilty, and the outcome of the trial really displayed the court system in California as massively incompetent, which they were in that case. There's no doubt about it that the fuck-ups of the prosecution team resulted in O.J. being found not guilty. Had the prosecution done their job properly, none of that would have happened. And the judge knew this. It was embarrassing. And they were out for blood, and they didn't give a fuck whose blood it was. They weren't letting another high-profile case embarrass the shit out of them again. So they had their egos going. This absolutely had a huge impact on the outcome of the Menendez Brothers case, the second trial. So much so that the judge ruled that testimony regarding the alleged sexual abuse of their father was to be completely excluded.
What?
Yep.
That's the main basis of the defense.
Correct. This is what the defense relied on. This was the defense. Without that, they had nothing. So, with that, the trial starts.
Okay.
Yeah. Makes sense, right?
No. No, it does not.
So, March of 1996, 5 months after the retrial began, both Lyle and Erik Menendez were convicted of first-degree murder and subsequently sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. To add insult to injury, the brothers were sent to separate prisons, which seemed to be a move to further punish them as much as they could be punished. So, as of now, the brothers have spent 3 decades in prison, almost 35 years. In 2023, attorneys for the Menendez brothers filed a habeas petition, which argued that the brothers should be granted relief from their respective prison sentences based on new evidence that's been discovered in the past couple of years. So, regarding the new evidence, there was a letter that Erik wrote to his cousin, Andy Cano, prior to the murders. And apparently, this letter was found after Andy died, and his mother found it and turned it over. And I'm going to read an excerpt from the letter that Erik wrote when he was 17 years old. So this was a year before the murders. He says, "Mom isn't doing good. It's like she's here physically, but not mentally. She's just gone. I don't know why she puts up with Dad's shit. At times, I wish I could talk to her about things, especially Dad and I. But the way she worships him and tells him everything, I'm so afraid she will tell him whatever I say. So now I'm stuck here alone. I've been trying to avoid Dad. It's still happening, Andy, but it's worse for me now. He's so overweight that I just can't stand to see him. I never know when it's going to happen. Every night I stay up thinking he might come in. I know what you said before, but I'm afraid. He is crazy. He's warned me 100 times about telling anyone, especially Lyle. I don't know how I'll make it through this." And that was a letter that he wrote when he was 17.
My heart just continues to break.
Mm-hmm. In addition to the letter, even more evidence involved allegations from Roy Rosello and Angelo Garcia, both from the band Menudo, who state that they were sexually abused by Jose Menendez while they were underage in Menudo.
Oh.
So now we have more people coming out.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. And that was technically the end of my podcast until Thursday, October 24th. And on Thursday, October 24th, the Los Angeles DA's office announced that they had a decision regarding their recommendation of a resentencing or a retrial.
And?
So Los Angeles County District Attorney George Gascon held a press conference. Y'all know I was on the edge of my seat for that.
Yes.
And he announced that he recommended that the brothers be resentenced to 50 years to life. Now, this sounds like a not so positive development, but there's a law in the state of California that states anyone who has committed a murder under the age of 26 at the time should be released after a certain period of time.
Okay.
Now, just to remind everyone, Lyle was 21 years old at the time of the murders and Erik was 18. So they were both under the age of 26. Another thing that everyone needs to remember is a life sentence does not mean life in prison. I know that's confusing, but a life sentence does not mean life in prison. What does mean life in prison is a life sentence without the possibility of parole. That is a life sentence.
That's interesting. I didn't know that.
Mm-hmm. Yep. So ultimately, the Menendez brothers do have a shot at living outside of prison walls. My biggest takeaway from the press conference is that the DA acknowledged that he believes that the brothers were sexually molested by their father. So for a DA to say that, that's huge. And it tells me that the new evidence really helped sway their original opinions of the sexual molestation claims. The DA is saying they were sexually abused by their father. That's huge.
That is huge.
Mm-hmm. The DA also made a point to state that while it's never okay to murder someone despite the circumstances, that people become desperate in abusive situations. And he's right. Yeah. They do. He feels that their debt to society has been paid and that they should be paroled immediately. So, what does this mean for the brothers? This means that the DA will be filing their recommendation. And as of right now, they actually already did file it on Friday, October 25th. The judge will then review it, and the judge will agree or disagree. If the judge agrees, this will still need to pass through the parole board, and the parole board will also have to agree. Now, it's important to note that the DA made a point to say at the press conference that this was not a unanimous decision at the DA's office. There's still people that believe they should be in prison for life. So there's still hurdles, there's still a ways to go, but this is definitely a step in the right direction for the Menendez brothers. And of course, we'll continue to keep you guys updated because this is huge.
That is
so
huge.
My thoughts on this. It's about rehabilitation and the possibility of reoffending. It's about the circumstances under which the murder occurred, which was abuse. Would this have even happened had those circumstances of abuse not existed? And I feel like this needs to be taken into consideration. Is it safe to release Lyle and Erik, or are they dangerous, murdering sociopaths who will do this again? So this is what I want everyone to think long and hard about. These two men have been in prison for almost 35 years with absolutely zero hope of being released from prison. Now, statistically, a lot of prisoners sentenced to life without the possibility of parole or sentenced to the death penalty, they tend to act up in prison. Because why should they care? They have nothing to live for. They don't have any hope.
Right.
So with that in mind, let's do a rundown of what's going on in their lives as they've been in prison. So according to the California Department of Corrections and Rehabilitation, in an email from them to biography.com, Erik has had 2 violations in the 3 decades he has been in prison. These were apparently minor. He does admit that he has had to fight in prison due to his high-profile status. Like, people fuck with him in prison.
Oh, I'm sure they do.
Yeah. But he states that he never fought first. So, again, these seem like minor issues related to prison life, and I couldn't find any serious behavioral issues on Erik's end other than those 2 violations that don't seem to be that serious.
Yeah, it sounds like somebody swung at him and he swung back.
Exactly.
And they have to write it up.
Yep. Lyle, on the other hand, has incurred absolutely no rules violations in the 30 years that he's been in prison. So over 30 years, no violations. Because of the brothers' good behavior, they now reside together. So they've been reunited.
Yay!
Mm-hmm. They now reside together in what's called an echo yard, which provides inmates who consistently display good behavior an opportunity for more rehabilitative and educational opportunities. So, despite being split up for the second trial, they were eventually reunited and they now reside together at the Richard J. Donovan Correctional Facility. Erik spends his time in prison painting, and he also works with terminally ill inmates, and he advocates for better conditions for them. Lyle has a passion for prison reform and even served as a member of the inmate government for over a decade. And both brothers work with inmates who have experienced sexual abuse as children, just as they had. The brothers even created a program called Green Space at the prison that they're both housed at. And this is actually based on Norway's style of incarceration. This essentially believes that nature and creating a more normal environment as opposed to an oppressive prison style and approach helps to successfully reintegrate offenders back into society. So the brothers spearheaded this project.
I do think that it sounds like they have done a lot of rehabilitation and have done a lot of good and positive.
I agree. Yeah. Erik is the lead painter for the mural in the Green Space program. Both of the brothers are married. In June of this year, Lyle even obtained a bachelor's degree in sociology through the University of California's college program for inmates.
That's awesome.
So they're doing good things.
Yeah.
But despite all of the good and all of the positive things that the brothers have done, they still struggle with the effects of undergoing extended sexual trauma and abuse from their father. Their aunt, Joan Vandermullen, sister of Kitty Menendez, revealed recently in an interview with Vanity Fair that Erik used to eat lemons with his meals. Like, he would completely douse lemon all over his meals as a child. This was very weird behavior to them. He would freak out and he would not eat unless he had lemon. No one knew why at the time. It's now come out that Erik would douse lemon all over his food in order to diminish his taste buds in preparation for when his father sexually abused him. Jones states that to this day, Erik has to have lemon with his meals. That's how ingrained this is. That's just one example of how childhood trauma can completely destroy your life and also manifest itself in different ways.
That is, I mean, I want to say that's crazy, but not in like the term actually crazy. The situation
sad.
is crazy and sad.
Yep. Kitty's sister continues to advocate for the release of her nephews. So even her sister is like, these boys should not be in prison. And I believe the same. And with that, I will end this with one quote from me. Free the Menendez brothers. Seriously, though.
I'm going to second that. Free the Menendez brothers.
On the surface, this looks like two spoiled rich kids killing their parents for money. Mm-hmm. But that's why you can't take things on surface value. People react to trauma in all kinds of ways. Mm-hmm. I feel like this was a manifestation of an entire lifetime of trauma for these boys. I mean, the abuse for Erik started at 3 years old. Mm-hmm. That's an entire fucking lifetime.
Well, yeah. And how sad that you feel like you have no way out. You literally have no way out, and your abusive parents will not let you leave.
The interesting part of this to me is that just like a week or two before the murders was when the conversation between Erik and his father took place, where his father was like, no, you're not leaving. So
his father also threatened to kill him.
Correct.
So at this point, mentally, kill or be killed.
And I think what happened is when Erik went to his big brother, he fucking lost his shit. I mean, he even confronted him and was like, stop doing this. And his father was like, no, I'm not. Like, it's not your business. Mm-hmm. So I think at that point, they had just fucking had it.
I get it.
Yeah. So what did you think? Did you have a different opinion of this case before all of the information?
Yes. Well, I intentionally didn't watch any of it because I enjoy the way that you tell me the stories.
Oh, thanks.
Like I'm like your number one listener. I just happen to be in the room with you. But yeah, I mean, ultimately it does start off and it sucks because you do assume like two rich kids kill their parents. Like, you're like, oh, fuck them. They just wanted the money. Mm-hmm. But yeah, it's sad. It's really, really, really sad what they had to endure and what they went through. And
very sad. Yeah.
I mean, I can understand why they murdered their parents. I mean, it's a weird thing to say, but I get it. And I think I said earlier, it's like kill or be killed at that point.
Yeah. I mean, just all of the psychological trauma that they had to go through. I don't know. I just feel like it needs to be taken into account. I mean, the times have changed. Right. We are in a different mindset as a society than we were in the 90s.
Yes.
These cases need to be reevaluated. And there's more out there.
Yeah.
I mean, like I said in the beginning of this podcast, we're working on an interview of someone who is related to someone that I feel should be let out of prison. Because of the circumstances. I'm not saying murder is ever right. It's not. However, there's aggravating circumstances to some of these cases. And bullying, abuse, trauma can make you do things that you would not normally do. And I just feel that needs to be taken into consideration. We need to not be so black and white. It's more of a gray area.
Yeah.
Now, I know that I've said before, like, called people assholes and stuff who have committed murders. But those are people like Erica and BJ Seifert, like, that just committed atrocious murders for absolutely zero fucking reason. These people weren't abused. They weren't bullied. They just wanted to kill for the sake of killing. That I feel is more difficult to rehabilitate.
Well, yeah, that's
but people, especially when they're so young and they commit these murders under certain circumstances, I don't know.
And they felt like there was no other way out.
Yeah, and again, your brain is not fully developed until late 20s, early 30s,
50s.
you know? Yeah.
Again, for men.
But yeah, we will continue to keep you updated on what's going on with the Menendez brothers. It could be something that moves very fast, or it could be something that moves very slow. Things in the legal field tend to move at a snail's pace, so I don't foresee anything happening before the end of the year. I hope I'm wrong, but we'll see what happens.
50-50 chance, right?
Yep, and we will update you accordingly. I really do hope that they are given the opportunity to be released on parole.
Is there a petition or anything out there that we can sign that we know of?
I'm sure there is, but at this point, I don't think it's even relevant. Like, this is just kind of in the hands of the judge at this point.
You think they would talk to us, the Menendez brothers?
If they're out, maybe. I mean, maybe if we get bigger.
Guys, make sure you like and subscribe so we can try to get them on.
Yes, like, the more views, the more likes, the more comments, the more shares, all of that, like it helps us. It really does. Like, the more legitimacy we have, the better content we can bring you, honestly. I mean, the more interviews we'll get, the more it'll just help. It really will. Well, thanks for listening.
We love you very much, and we can't wait to see you or have you listen to us again, hopefully, and be part of our friend group.
So we will see you next Tuesday.
And don't be one.
Bye.
Bye.